All right, welcome to The Explainer. So today we're jumping into one of philosophy's most electrifying and, let's be honest, most misunderstood books, Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. Now, this is a book that's not here to make you feel comfortable. No, it's designed to challenge, to really shake up the very foundations of Western thought.
Nietzsche's writing is just packed with these kinds of warnings. It's like he's daring us to look straight into the darkness. The darkness out there in the world, but also the one inside ourselves, and to do it without letting it swallow us whole. He's basically asking us to think dangerously. So yeah, let's dive in and unpack these pretty radical ideas.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this thing, we're going to break it down into 6 key parts. We'll start with Nietzsche's philosophical hammer, then get into the problem with truth, talk about why there are no facts, compare master versus slave morality, see the rise of what he calls free spirits, and then wrap up with why this is all still a challenge for us today.
First up, Part 1, Nietzsche's philosophical hammer. So, let's get our bearings here. Who was this guy who famously said he philosophized with a hammer, and, where exactly does Beyond Good and Evil fit into his pretty explosive career?
So if you look at the timeline, you can see Beyond Good and Evil comes out pretty late in the game for him in 1886. And this is right after he writes his super famous, kind of poetic and prophetic book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The timing here is absolutely crucial. It's like he's shifting gears, moving away from the poetry of Zarathustra and launching a direct, systematic attack on the entire history of philosophy. He's really sharpening his arguments into a weapon here.
All right, Part 2, the problem with truth. So what was Nietzsche really going after with that hammer of his? Well, his main target was this 2,000-year-old obsession in philosophy, this quest for some kind of absolute, objective, unchanging truth, with a capital T.
He basically argued that, look, ever since Plato came along, philosophers have been making this one huge mistake. They just assumed that truth was this pure, eternal thing, totally separate from our messy, complicated real lives. Like it was some kind of hidden treasure, just waiting for them to find it.
And Nietzsche did not mince words. He called this a dogmatist's error. He felt that Plato literally stood truth on her head by yanking it away from perspective, which, for Nietzsche, is the basic condition of all life. He was convinced that this idea of a true world separate from the one we actually live in, well, it was a total catastrophe for Western thought.
Okay, so if that whole search for absolute truth is a dead end, where do we go from there? What's the alternative? Well, this brings us to Part 3, and one of Nietzsche's most radical and frankly most misunderstood ideas, perspectivism. So what is perspectivism? Well, at its core is this really wild claim. There are no absolute facts, only interpretations. Our values aren't just out there waiting to be discovered. Nope. They are invented by us. We don't find meaning, we create it. Everything we think we know is shaped by the unique lens, our own personal perspective that we're looking through. Now, for a lot of people, this idea is terrifying, right? It sounds like nothing is real or matters. But for Nietzsche, he thought it was amazing. He found it totally liberating. His thinking was, hey, if we're the ones creating values, that means we have the power to create new ones, better ones that say yes to life.
So this leads to a pretty big question. If we're the ones inventing morality, what kinds have we come up with so far? This is where Nietzsche puts on his historian hat. He looks back and says, I see 2 basic types, and they've been locked in this epic struggle for centuries. Which brings us to Part 4, master versus slave morality. And this chart just lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got master morality. This is the morality of the confident, the noble, the powerful. They basically look at themselves and say, yeah, this is good, and they create their values from that place of strength. But then you have slave morality, which is the total opposite. It's reactive. It starts from a place of resentment. It looks at the powerful and says, everything you are is evil, which must mean that we, the weak, the humble, are good. So where did this come from? Well, Nietzsche traces what he calls the slave revolt in morals all the way back to ancient Judaism, and he argues it was Christianity that perfected it and spread it everywhere. It was a total flip-flop of the old noble values. Suddenly, being strong was a sin, being powerful was evil, and things like weakness, pity, and being humble, they got a rebrand. They became virtues. In Nietzsche's view, this herd morality, as he called it, has been running the show in Europe for 2,000 years. So, after all that, you might be thinking, is this guy just trying to tear everything down? But that's not it at all. He saw himself as clearing the ground to build something new.
a new kind of philosopher, maybe even a new kind of human being. So let's get into part 5, the rise of free spirits, and see what he wanted to build.
He says right in the book that it's for free, very free spirits. He's calling for these philosophers of the future, people who can actually move past that old, rigid morality of good and evil. And these are his free spirits. They're the people who are strong enough to look at the world without those comforting traditional blinders on, and brave enough to create their own values.
Now here's a twist. Nietzsche didn't actually see those 2,000 years of slave morality as a complete waste. He thought it created this magnificent tension of the spirit in Europe. Think of it like pulling back a bowstring. All that self-discipline, all that restraint, he believed it actually forged a new kind of inner strength, a strength that could now be used to shoot for something much, much higher.
So, what does any of this mean for us, reading this book over 100 years later? I mean, beyond the history lesson, why should we care about this today? That's what we'll tackle in our final section, Part 6, A Challenge for Today.
I think the key is right there in the subtitle, Prelude to a Philosophy of the Future. This book isn't a rule book. It's not a conclusion. It's an invitation. It's an opening act. See, Nietzsche isn't handing us a new list of commandments. What he's doing is forcing you to question the very foundations of your own values, the things you probably just assume are true.
And that's really the powerful question he leaves us with. If morality isn't some fact of the universe, but something we interpret and create, then what will your interpretation be? In a world where, as he famously said, God is dead, meaning the foundation for absolute truth has crumbled, well, the job of creating meaning falls right on our shoulders. Nietzsche's challenge isn't just for philosophers in an ivory tower. It's for every single one of us to stop being just a member of the herd and start being the artist of your own life, the creator of your own values.